Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Griffin. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of VAS. We have Cindy with us from VAS as well. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning on the top 10 questions to assess your MTSS system. We're doing this with Renaissance, one of our partners, and we're so thankful to have them as a partner. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Pinsky, who's going to present this information to you today. Hi, Nick.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So what I'm going to do is do my screen share here. Let's make sure that uh, that our Zoom is playing nicely. I see a thumbs up, Amy. Thank you so much. So um, welcome, everyone. We've got a lot of our Renaissance team here, folks who are here available to support you with your questions that you might have about the content that I'm going to cover. We have representatives from the VAST side of the house. Thank you for that introduction, as well as you, the participants who are here to unpack your MTSS, here to learn about what the Renaissance Learning platform and the various solutions that we offer can do to help level up and bolster your multi-tiered systems of support. But also, you're going to hear from me in terms of unpacking your state model for what a multi-tiered system of support or systems of support look like within a K-12 space, right? Around the state of Virginia, it might look different from school to school. And so wherever you're at on your MTSS journey is right where you need to be. We're going to offer some best practices, some ideas, and some perhaps new ways of working that might help you better uplift a system of data-based decision making, a system of tiered supports for kids, or let's just call it kids get what they need when they need it, right? In regular ed, and it doesn't require an IEP eval, for example, right? So we're going to unpack some of these sticking points in a multi-tiered system. And I'd like to just start by saying that please contribute in the chat window. If you have questions, ideas you'd like to contribute, my colleagues on the call are going to be sort of watching that and letting me know if something comes through. But without further ado, let's get rolling here. So I like to introduce myself and my background because it's relevant to today's discussion. I'm not just a software guy, although I am a lover of the Renaissance ecosystem of our package of solutions, but I am also a practitioner. Right. So I've spent years as a district level leader, MTSS coordinator here in Wisconsin in the Madison Metropolitan School District, our state capital here, involved in the K-12 public school space as a lead school psychologist, as a director of software, and I launched a number of Renaissance solutions in my district. So from EduClimber, our sort of MTSS workflow and analytics tool, to FastBridge, valid, reliable screeners, SABRES as well, our social academic emotional behavior risk screener. I know that's a mouthful, but that's why we call it SABRES, right? Because that's that acronym to keep it shorter. We have a number of ways that I've been able to leverage these tools for the betterment of children, for making a difference and moving the needle for students in my district. And so now I'm so excited to be on the Renaissance side to help share with districts like you on this call how you can do the same. And so without further ado, today's discussion, 10 questions to assess your MTSS. I'm not going to give you a sort of Kahoot thing you need to log in and jot notes. I'm not going to force you into participation and pigeonhole you with some tools you need to use now. But I'll encourage you, if you like to take notes on the side with a Google Doc, if you like to jot down notes, I'm old school. I've got my paper and pencil right here. That's the way I take notes. There might be some real thought starters. There might be some nuggets you want to take back to your team today. And so I will encourage you, please consider taking notes as we are, again, reflecting on your MTSS. That means you, if you're on this call live, or if you're watching this recording after the fact. You're all welcome to the table. We're so glad that you're here. And again, if questions come up, you have a whole group of Renaissance folks here to answer your questions and follow up along the way. So let's get rolling. Our mission here at Renaissance is to accelerate learning for all. And so we're going to take a look at some whole child considerations, right? The full package of unpacking not just the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? But we're going to look at social emotional factors or attitudes to learning or behavior and attendance and other pieces that fulfill that sort of whole child model. And so I don't want us to just think whole child. I also want us to think every child. right? And certainly within a multi-tiered system, we have universal practices that are going to touch the lives of every student in our schoolhouses, right? Superintendents, you know the value of the culture that we're building within our schools. And so I'm going to make sure that we're giving a shout out to those whole child pieces for every child. And so here's how we're going to get there. We're going to build a solid foundation. We're going to unpack what your state has put forth as its MTSS model. And as a national MTSS advisor, I love taking the opportunity to look from state to state, the commonalities, the differences, and the unique pieces in terms of what their call outs are. And so we're going to see an emphasis on community involvement. We're going to see an emphasis on our best practices around using data to make a difference for kids. And yeah, we're going to be grounded in the Virginia MTSS model, or VTSS, as I believe they call it in their group. We're going to unpack that together. So then let's assess, right? Once we've established these solid foundations, these best practices, these ways of sort of implementing an effective system in our districts, in our schools, in our classrooms, down to that individual child level, let's assess whether we're doing it, right? Let's take an honest look sort of in the mirror to say, how well are we accomplishing this? Or do I need some resources that might help me further? Right? This is a judgment-free zone. Like I said, wherever you're at in your MTSS process is right where you need to be, and we're going to help you move it forward. And so with that, improving your MTSS implementation is all about empowering you with tools, empowering you with resources and next steps. I am not simply going to say, buy this tool, buy that tool, although we certainly have a suite of spectacular resources here at Renaissance. I'm also going to give you some tidbits that you can take back to your team today after this call to just self-reflect, analyze, and help you build a springboard into elevating your practices. So with that, I'm going to open with a bit of an analogy, and then we're going to dig into the nitty-gritty, starting with the totally full plate of a teacher, right? It's 2026. We know that engaging instruction isn't the only thing teachers are responsible for. And really, superintendents, you have a full plate too, by golly, and the principals in your schools and the district level leaders and everyone in between. But we know that on a full plate, this notion that we're going to add something more to it, how am I supposed to do MTSS work if I've got this totally full plate already, right? And so superintendents, district leaders, school leaders, you know that it's tough to suddenly sort of promote a new model, promote a new system, right? The Virginia Literacy Act asks us to be a little more intensive about how we assess and support students around their literacy-based needs, right? And yes, the state provides us VALs and SOLs and the VGAs and these pieces that are going to help us solve that. But it's tough to roll new things out. And so in that dialogue around rolling out an MTSS practice, the question is, am I supposed to cram that onto my totally full plate, right? Teachers might be wondering, hey, superintendent or principal on this call, are you going to cut out these 4 other things I got to do so that I can go do MTSS, whatever that means, right? Is it something where we're going to try and cram multi-tiered systems onto their totally full plate such that it spills over to poor fidelity, to poor implementation, right? Of course not. And so I'm going to promote a paradigm shift where MTSS is not another thing on your plate. It's the plate itself, right? It's the methodology, it's the ways of working that we're going to better organize all that stuff that our educators are responsible for, right? All that stuff that principals and superintendents and district level leaders are responsible for. Let's not add to our plate. Let's better organize the plate we've already got. And so your state Department of Education provides us a model to do that. Woohoo! All right. So we're empowered already with something in terms of again, methodology, ways of working that says we're going to offer scaffolds of support to kids in our schools. And here's how you're going to do it in a model that is data-driven, in a model that is evidence-based, right? And we're going to talk about what evidence, actually, not just a pie in the sky, fancy researcher at a university told me that it works for kids, but I want to see that evidence in practice in my community, right? I want to see that evidence based on what teachers rely on and trust locally, right? And so evidence-based doesn't mean the same thing from one place to another, and we're going to unpack that a little more together. Clearly defined process. I love this, because I know in my practice as a school psychologist, as a district leader in MTSS work, we made a nifty little guidebook, an 87-page Google Doc that says, here's how you go do MTSS, right? And what we were missing were the nuts and bolts to actually make it happen in our schools. And so, yes, I dipped my toes into 32 different schools' MTSS practices in the course of 1 year to audit their systems and learn more about what they're actually doing locally in my district. And we found that the resources that they needed were a clear platform to have their child study model in action, right? A clear system where I'm not just taking notes for a student plan and it collects cobwebs and, gets dust on it sitting in my Google Drive. And in fact, next year, someone has to knock on my door and say, hey, Mr. Pinsky, did you have a plan for Jimmy here? Can you please share it with me? Oops, you need to share it with this other person too, right? It becomes this sort of clogged up system that's not working for kids, right? If you're relying on paper pencil referrals for all of your MTSS systems, that might be clogging up your system as a whole, right? And so I'm going to unpack specifically EduClimber for you as a solution to help systematize the way that work can all happen. And in fact, share some success stories in terms of my district rollout as well. So a clearly defined process means we have systems in place and also we adhere to those systems. We help them thrive in our schools and we walk side by side with teachers in implementing them successfully, right? And so implementation that is successful might be also called fidelity, right? That we're doing things as designed, as intended. When we leave a problem-solving meeting, our teacher's clear about what they're going to go do with a kid. Let's have systems that help us establish that clarity. Let's use Renaissance Next, for example, as a clear connection between student assessment and now what's the action I'm going to go take as an educator, right? In fact, even partnering with your core curriculum publishers in some cases to say, go teach this exact module, which is really cool. And I'm excited to show you that as well. So adherence to this model is the name of the game for our discussion here today. And here it is. Live and direct, the MTSS or VTSS, Virginia Tiered Systems of Support. I am going to, let's see if I can get my pen tool here to work. Yep, I just love that schools, families, communities are all given a shout out here in terms of this collaborative effort. It's not its own separate facet of the model. It is embedded in the whole thing, right? It is this theme across the board that we're going to be talking with parents and guardians. We're going to be talking with community leaders. And you know what? If we have partnerships with after-school programs, the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA and other places in the community where kids are engaging in after-school participation, right? Let's have local connections there as well. And so this model is going to be what we talk about for the course of our discussion. I'm not going to read it out loud to you. You certainly can read it yourself on that screen. But again, we're going to give some specific call outs to each of these pieces. Some of the main elements being that we rely on real data to inform instructional decisions, right? We rely on actual data to say whether our schools are succeeding or not, to say whether kids hit the mark or not, right? And certainly the Department of Ed is asking that of us regularly. We also have problem-solving processes where we are not just sort of wild, wild west. We're going to sit down and we're just going to hash it out and talk about a student need, but we are going to have a system by which we can ask the right questions and help answer them in the context of those meetings. A tiered model of supports, everybody knows that's the T in MTSS. That asks us to offer different scaffolds for different kids, essentially, right? Different levels of intensity of the supports we provide based on the intensity of the needs expressed by our students in our classrooms. And so these are principles that are all familiar to us, formerly called RTI, then called RTI squared. Some places call it MLSS. Potato, potato. The name of the game is using data to inform a differentiated model of supports to kids, right? And it ain't easy. MTSS has been one of the most difficult initiatives to implement, right? We talked about that full plate of our educators and how this whole paradigm shift is not cramming more onto the plate, but in fact, replacing the way that we conceptualize our work to begin with. That's tough, right? And so it feels sometimes like moving mountains. I know it did in my district, in my experience as a practitioner. And so I just want to acknowledge that. The important work that you're doing is right for kids. MTSS isn't going away. It's not the next new hot thing. And if I just ignore it long enough, I won't have to do it anymore. It is the connective tissue, as my colleague A.B. Patno says, between the systems that are working in our schools. working for the benefit of kids. And so my first question to you, remember, we're framing this in the context of 10 questions to assess your MTSS. Ask yourself this, or ask your teammate if they're sitting next to you. Do our school and district teams embrace these basic principles, right? Do families and community stakeholders embrace these principles? I'll give a clear-cut example. I was in Minnesota last week working with a district that said teachers reacted really negatively to the term MTSS. And it's probably because we rolled it out with a number of compliance pieces that they had to check the boxes on, right? Superintendents, you know this so well. If we're going to require something of our staff, it needs to be really intentional. We need to lead with the why this matters for you as a teacher, and not a compliance top-down model, right? That's sort of happening to them, falling on their heads, and good luck figuring it out, right? And so with this district, we actually reframed their launch of our MTSS workflow tool, EduClimber, to say, this doesn't need to be called MTSS. Let's call it each kid gets what they need when they need it, right? Or let's call it your systems of intervention groups, right? Just retooling or repackaging the way that they're going to do MTSS work and calling it their own local model is what worked for that community. And so perhaps you jotted a note, perhaps you turned and talked with your colleague. If you're watching this asynchronously, pause the video here. Talk with a colleague if you're sitting next to someone about how does an MTSS actually resonate with your local community? And if not, then there might be some work to do in terms of a campaign, a flyer, some parent listening sessions to talk about how when kids need help, it's not just an IEP referral. It's not just a 504 referral. It's not just an alternative school that's down the road, right? We are helping kids universally as a practice that we do in our schools, right? Every child is all of our child. In what I mean by that is that we are problem solving in regular ed. We're problem solving. English learners gain access to grade level content in the same classroom as their native English speaking peers, right? These methodologies, these ways of working sometimes require a little bit of padding to make sure that folks are on board with it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. If your district is stuck in this spot, call us. We're going to generate some ideas to help you out. So visiting this model itself, take a look at my screen and how we're going to zoom in on a particular piece, starting with tiered continuum of supports, or continua if you have multiples, right? This is where we're saying that we have instructional practices that we can hang our hat on. My district uses benchmark education. My district uses HMH tools, or those SAVAS tools, or whatever those core curricular things are that you've invested in. You bought the boxed package, you bought the materials, and we are implementing it. And I'll say to fidelity, right? Doing it right for kids. In tiers 2 and 3, right? Kids who are not responding to that grade level, sort of standard universal instruction, may need something more, may need more intensive, more longer duration of what we're providing to them, right? It's not just pull out from the classroom. It might be, think about your second grade teacher who's pulling kids to that kidney table in the back of the room. How does she know which kids to pull? Right? She's relying on data to inform that. She or he is determining that based on evidence. And so we're going to look at that in a little bit. The appropriate levels are based on assessment data. And so this is my call out to everyone's favorite triangle. You can't talk MTSS without bringing up the triangle, right? And so we're not going to dwell on the triangle, but I'll give a quick shout out to it, which is question number 2. If we're starting with a model that has universal practices that we can all hang our hat on for all kids, what are those? Can you name them? I bet you can, right? I bet that you are probably signing on the dotted line for a pretty bulky purchase of those core publisher resources that you rely on, and that teachers get great training on, right? And that teachers are adhering to, and even across those PLC levels, they are collaborating to say, what lessons are we teaching next? What kids, what areas of learning do we need to give a double dose on because kids didn't quite get it the first time, right? So this is what universal practices look like in a tiered model. And so I will ask of you, again, if you're watching this recording, you may want to pause, you may want to jot it down, or you may want to discuss with someone next to you. What is your core instruction? You might give a shout out. You know what? If you can find the chat window, if you're in this live and direct right now, if you could kindly just type one core curriculum that is currently being used in your school, that'll help contribute to the dialogue among our peers here. So don't be shy. Find that chat window in Zoom and chime in with one or two core curriculum resources that you rely on right now. And as you're doing that, I just have some thought-provoking, sort of deeper questions. This is the extra credit if you're filling out these questions for yourself. Is that core instructional model or curriculum that you have evidence-based? Is it research supported? And does your data indicate that it's addressing the needs of most kids, right? This tier 1 should be the biggest piece of our triangle, where research suggests that somewhere around 80% of all kids should be responding to that core instruction, right? And we're going to talk a little bit in a moment about what if they're not? What if my triangle is upside down, so to speak? And so to my colleagues, yes, I'm seeing something in the chat. Yes, Savas, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I mentioned benchmark earlier. HMH, yep, we mentioned that one as well. Fantastic. So excellent. Thank you for sharing out sort of locally what that means to you. Let's keep that in our mind's eye, that that's what we mean when we're talking about core publishers. And anyone on this call might vary from one person to another, what that might be, and that's okay, right? You make your own local decisions about what curriculum is right for you. So what if my triangle's upside down? You can't intervene your way out of it, right? If 40 to 50% of kids aren't responding to core instruction, you're not going to dump 40 to 50% of kids in a pull-out intervention, right? Obviously, we know that that's not going to work. Although 10, 15 years ago, some folks actually thought that that's how we're going to construct our schools, where grade level learning that's universal was not universal, right? And so from an inclusive model, as well as a sort of sustainability model, if students are exhibiting a lack of progression through universal core instruction to hit the mark, to perform at grade level, then we are going to answer that call in that universal core instruction, right? And so I also want us to consider that universal instruction is for all. I said it before and I said it again. Students with disabilities belong in regular ed spaces where they can access grade level content with their peers. Period. Hard stop. Right? There is, yes, a place for pullout. Yes, there is a place for individualized instruction, right? Or SDI, specially designed instruction in that IEP language. They're getting supplementary aids and services. They're getting accommodations in the classroom on testing and so forth. Yes, yes, and yes. And also, they're interacting with their peers. They're learning in an environment where they have access to grade level content, right? And same goes for English learners. Same goes for students who are having difficulty showing up to school with attendance problems. We are still welcoming them into our classrooms and offering them core instruction, right? And so on the subject of core instruction, welcome to Renaissance Next Core Publisher Partnerships. Wouldn't it be great if I administer a star screener and then I have evidence of where I need to go next in my core instruction? With Renaissance Next, you have that. You'll notice here that we have a number of math and English language arts partnerships, many of which were mentioned in the chat already. I'm so glad to see that, where I'm not just saying these kids' scores suggest you should go teach these skills. I'm also going to tell you within Savas where to find those skills, right? Within McGraw-Hill and HMH tools, where to actually open up their modules to engage those students in that learning. It's also, yeah, so excited to see MyView Literacy up there. Thank you, Haley. Yeah, absolutely. And this is really just the start. We're so pleased that actually core curriculum providers are chomping at the bit, knocking on our door saying, we want to connect with Renaissance Next. We want to help teachers see the bridge from assessment to instruction. And so by the end of this year, we're going to align with more than 80% of math curriculum around the country and over 50% of ELA curriculum around the country, right? That is huge. And other providers out there aren't actually really able to say that, right? This is unique to Renaissance, and we're so proud of these connections and partnerships. Yes. Thank you, Aaron, for the shout out to when this is coming up. BTS, it's back to school, 26, 27. Yeah, big moves happening in August and into September. But what about my implementation of assessments within those core curricula? That's where I'm going to mention here DNA, our data and assessment platform, where let's say, I like to share in the bottom left that I had the Bridges number corner assessments in Madison, Wisconsin. We had these curriculum embedded assessments or unit tests or checkups on kid performance. It was paper and pencil. It was scattered across 80 different spreadsheets. And then you send your school spreadsheet to a central office spreadsheet, and we make a spreadsheet out of the spreadsheet. It was insane, right? It was too much for us to manage. It was not tenable. And so what we could explore with the DNA solution is, in fact, offering a virtual platform to administer those curriculum embedded assessments. Now I can give kids a interactive PDF screen where they can jot their notes down, mark it up, do their problem solving, and answer the questions, all in a platform that's going to auto score it, that's going to give me a summary of how kids are performing on Bridges number corner assessments at that class, at that grade, at that school, and district-wide, right? Giving us a reliable, efficient, quick, easy way to engage with our core curricular assessments that teachers are using along the way, right? So consider it simple and plain. If teachers are giving a quiz, paper and pencil, and wasting their time trying to score it bit by bit, let's rely on a tool like DNA to empower us with tools that are going to automatically do that for you, automatically score it, automatically construct a report that's very thorough and engaging teachers in how kids are learning throughout the course of that curriculum delivery, right? And so we're on this piece about a tiered continuum of supports. We talked a lot about tier one. We talked about core instruction, universal for all kids, right? And I'm looking at the clock. I've got 34 minutes left, so I got to buzz. I got to get moving. Let's take a look at what we mean by instruction. High quality instruction being evidence-based, interventions being evidence-based, right? In tier 2 and tier 3, we're doing effective practices with kids. Of course we are. But let's ask ourselves, are we implementing them to fidelity? Are we producing the best outcomes? Are they working, right? And so when we ask this question about what evidence we have to demonstrate whether these programs are working, that is a great segue into the rest of our triangle, right? Where we can say push in versus pull out models, or a what I need period win models. Think about secondary schools, right? Where they say, I don't have time for a kid to engage in intervention when they got to hit these credits in order to graduate. That's why we have credit recovery courses. That's why we have, across a block schedule model, flexibility in how we're scheduling and offering what an intervention might look like at the middle and high school level is certainly different than what you're going to see at the elementary level. And so let's honor that and let's take a look at those. I have a call out here to asset inventories. And so this is a fancy term for take a look at what you offer in your school and ask yourself whether it's hitting the mark, right? Ask yourself whether we have both reading and math interventions, or we're just focused on literacy now. If there's intentionality and a reason behind it, great. What about social, emotional, and behavioral interventions, right? I can recall the dozens of kids that I did check in, check out with, where yes, we're going to ask, be safe, be responsible, be respectful, universally sort of available for kids who need that extra dose of support. But also, I can jump in and I'm looking on my Zoom chat here. Let's say Cynthia has a more individualized goal. Cynthia will keep hands to self in cafeteria, blah, 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 right? We have those more individualized behavior goals for kids. Let's use a tool like EduClimber to help record those check-in, check-out connections with kids. Let's actually plot out Cynthia's success over time within the context of that intervention so that I can show her progress over time. I can show not just her reductions in ODRs, office discipline referrals, but have a model where I'm able to show her successes with those individualized goals that I built. Time necessarily to walk you through how tools like EduClimber can do that for you. Call us up, invite me for a demonstration. I would love to visit with your district and show you what that looks like. What about intersectionality? Ooh, so this is a hot button one. We could talk a whole half hour about this. If I'm an English learner with a disability, what does my service provision look like in the school environment, right? Do I get tiered supports in both areas, or does one take precedent? I worked with a principal who flat out said, IEP trumps ELL. You are going to get your special ed services first. And if we can find time within the week, you might get a little ELL support as well, right? Whew. Let's talk about kids being college, career, and community ready as they leave as a graduate. from your district? Is that kid getting that quality instruction that they need? It sounds like there's some gaps there, right? And so I'm not here to necessarily tell you what's right or wrong. I'm just offering some thought-provoking questions where, again, if you're watching this asynchronously, pause right here and talk. What do we give kids who aren't responding to tier 1? I might also ask in the chat, again, thank you to our participants, specifically Ashley and Brenda and Haley, who are chiming in and saying, engaging with the dialogue, what's an intervention that you offer in your district? Do you have items from the What Works Clearinghouse? Have you purchased boxed interventions? Type in the chat one strategy that you do at tier 2 or tier 3 for your kids. I'm going to get started. And yep, I'm an MTSS guy, so I just have these off the top of my head. But you might very well, yes, benchmark, Bridges math, vocab search. Thank you, Haley. Hey, I was just talking about Bridges math. So I hope that resonated with you as well. Lexia, read one any. Fantastic. Bridges for math. Built-in read mediation block. Yes, Orton Gillingham, Lexia. Isn't it fantastic that now in this day and age, we're relying on the science of reading, right? To actually have foundations in real life tools that work, real life strategies that work for kids. This is breakthrough stuff. I love to see what we've got here within the chat. So thank you everyone for chiming in about that. When we talk about, okay, this is the intervention, this is the tool, this is the Lexia, this is the Read 180, we also need to make sure that we are asking how, right? We've often answered the who, what, where, when. We're going to fit it in this time and so forth. But how do you fit it in the school day? I talked about WIN models and I talked about those credit recovery models at high school and so forth. These are some additional questions. Let's just say food for thought or more like extra credit questions. If we were in person and we were doing a 2-hour seminar, I might say turn and talk with your table. But yeah, if you're watching this asynchronously, you might consider pausing here as well and talk about your district's biggest strengths and gaps and implications for next steps. How are we delivering Orton Gillingham, right? Where and when are we delivering it? Do we have the interventionist resources there? Are they actually progress monitoring within these systems or not, right? All good questions to help us check on the health of our system. So we've dug real deep into that tiered model, that tiered continuum of supports for all kids, for some kids, and for few kids, or those individualized needs, let's say at tier 3. Now let's take it down to evaluation. What's driving that work? How do we determine mobility across tiers? Hopefully we're using evidence. Hopefully we're using data. We have a coordinated system of multiple assessments and measures. We've got VALs, we've got our SOLs, we've got our VGAs, we got STAR assessments and FastBridge, and you might have others from other providers like an NWA assessment, perhaps an iReady assessment. That's okay, right? You're engaging with database decision-making with what's working for your district, and we're glad to see it. You have a balanced system, and I'll get into a little bit more what that actually means. You're screening students, right? In fact, the Virginia Literacy Act tells us we must screen kids at these grades with these tools. Progress monitoring, I gave a few shout outs to that, but that's really evaluating whether our interventions are working for kids. And those diagnostics, right? I've screened every kid and certain students exhibit a challenge in terms of reading. What is that individual challenge? What is that gap area that we need to target? Diagnostics are going to help answer that, whether it's from fluency to decoding to those other important pieces of the Scarborough's rope, so to speak, of the science of reading model. We're going to use this evaluation framework to determine whether our systems are working and for whom. In other words, getting our bang for our buck. And so I don't know if it's in my slide deck. I'm going to go off script here and go out to a specific solution. This is EduClimber that you're seeing on our home screen. To answer whether it's working for kids, I have such easy, streamlined, straightforward tools to access that information. Superintendents, district leaders, school leaders, you can see simple and plain how many kids are engaged in interventions. What are those interventions by school, by grade, by strategy? On this model here, we see check in, check out at the elementary is the most popular one. That's pretty true to reality in my experience. But we've got math and literacy and fluency decoding interventions across the board here, helping me see what our delivery of that multi-tiered model actually looks like. When I worked at Hamilton Middle School with 880 kids, we used this graphic to say, by interventionist, are we seeing parity across their caseloads? Are certain teachers meeting with way more kids than others? Are our interventionists, do they have a pretty balanced caseload or not? And this helped us answer that question, right? But the bang for your buck value is coming right here, where I'm not just going to see who's in which interventions and how many. Now I'm superimposing their goal attainment on that intervention data, right? This is breakthrough stuff. When you're recording Lexia and Read 180 and Benchmark and Bridges Math and Vocab Surge for your kids, let's see whether it works by saying this intervention here is one of the most popular ones in my district, and over half of kids are hitting their goal in that intervention. Yes, we are happy to see that. What about the kids who are not on track, who are not hitting their goal? With a platform like EduClimber, you can answer why they might not be hitting their goal. You can compare their rate of improvement to their overall goal. And in fact, take a look here at the individual student level, where I'm able to see why aren't they hitting that goal? Where's my evidence of that? It's going to take me just a moment to find this historical intervention, but notice how I now have a platform for recording my tiered delivery of supports to kids, right? Tanner is in a program here, the word building intervention with Alyssa and Raylyn. And these probes along the way, let's say perhaps STAR CBMs, let's say perhaps FastBridge progress monitors. Each dot represents a 1-minute probe I did with Tanner to see, gosh darn it, he's not hitting that goal. He's not on track to hit that green line at the end of the day. And so educators use EduClimber to manage this intervention, to say, you know what we're doing isn't working for Tanner. I am going to intervene on the intervention. I'm going to level up the supports that I'm providing to Tanner such that now I'm intensifying those supports and he is making the gains he needs to eventually here catch up to that goal, right? And so this is an individual student snapshot. This is my district snapshot of what success looks like, answering that question, whether our systems are working and for whom. It's here on the slide, I promise, right there at the end, whether our systems are working and for whom, right? And so in this conversation about evaluation, evaluating our system, evaluating student performance and progress along the way, this right here is representing a very robust, comprehensive assessment system where we're going to rely on high quality, valid, reliable tools to give me classroom formatives along the way, right? If I can simply say, when we start the class, I'm going to get a feel for how kids are comfortable with the lesson that we just practiced last week. Do you feel like you got a, fist to 5? Tell me about your familiarity with using fractions in comparison to decimals, right? Teachers are using classroom formatives on the fly all the time, right? But also there are more intensive benchmark or common formatives. We took a look at DNA assessments a little earlier. This is going to be a great way for us to say, you know what? All third grade teachers within the XYZ school district are going to have a common formative that's going to help us guide instruction on a universal level for all kids in that grade band. We're answering questions with screening, simply put, which kids are at risk. And when we identify risk, we rely on a diagnostic to say in what area, right? We progress monitor. We just saw Tanner's progress monitor telling us that what we were doing was not working for the student. They were not on track to meet their goal. And so we intensified. We changed our practice to help meet the needs of kids, right? And so across this comprehensive assessment system, we have information about how often you should do each one and who is responsible. Who is assessed in this model. There's public sentiment about us over testing our kids. And yes, if we're testing for the wrong reasons or over testing and not taking action on that, I agree with that sentiment. But when we are deliberate with our testing and we do it right and we do it with purpose, that's when we can leverage this to move the needle for kids to make a difference for our students. And so on this next slide here, I've superimposed our Renaissance solutions to help fill those gaps, to help you, superintendents on this call and district leaders on this call, to fill in your robust comprehensive assessment system wherever there might be gaps, right? I'm going to give a shout out to STAR assessments in particular, serving as a screener tool in your implementation of the Virginia Literacy Act as an approved tool to do that. STAR is the #1 most predictive screener in terms of how are kids going to perform on the SOL at the end of the year. STAR is highly correlated to SOL performance as well, right? Your standards of learning model. And so I'm going to show you how we can build that sort of correlational evidence in a little bit. So we're asking ourselves across this comprehensive assessment system, right? What I just showed, we call it our placemat tile because you can sit and gobble it up because there's a lot of information on there. We have a complete set of tools to help us take the best next steps. Alternative to the Virginia Growth Assessment. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate that. Those local considerations for your state. So across this comprehensive model, question 4 is our assessment system balanced? Do we use formative data to guide instruction? Yep. Awesome. What helps or hinders test administration, right? Is it right in the middle of soccer finals week? And we've got sort of some things inhibiting our ability to do the testing, right? Proctoring. Do we have the proctors and so forth? Do we actually give diagnostics after screening? Or is it sufficient perhaps to just say we identified risk and then we helped kids? Either model being okay. But these are some sort of thought starters that, again, you might want to unpack with your team when you're taking a look at how we use our assessment responsibly and effectively, right? So does interim data predict summative performance? Ooh la la. Enter STAR assessments, as I described, highly correlated with our SOL scores that we see here. A correlation of 0.7 or higher is good. A correlation of 0.8 or more is great. And so we see both good to great correlation across our STAR assessments as a predictor on the Virginia Standards of Learning assessments. And so we can hang our hat on that. When kids are assessed with STAR, when we're monitoring them using a screening model, perhaps fall, winter, spring, you can count on those fall and winter scores to be a good predictor of who's going to succeed on the SOL assessments and who is moving along those learning progressions. I don't have a ton of time to unpack this in particular, but when you're administering a STAR assessment, you can be confident that we are attending to what learning progressions look like across a literacy continuum, across a math continuum. It's not A, then B, then C, then D. These are interconnected skills, interconnected abilities and performance areas where we know that there are certain building blocks that are going to unlock future learning. And so with our STAR assessments, we use a model called focus skills. That's going to find the biggest blocks, the most impactful, the most critical, right? If you're missing those essential learning blocks around how to multiply fractions, you're going to have a tough time with algebra down the line, right? Things that you need in terms of prerequisites for learning down the line. Impactful. If you intervene on these, if you support these and teach to these focus skills, you're going to move the needle for kids on their performance. Your impactful standards, right? According to your state standards model, we're finding the focus skills that are most impactful. And again, aligned to your state standards. And in fact, if I go on the web at large, again, I'm going off script because I want to show you these STAR focus skills by state. You can look this up and find it for Virginia. Go ahead and Google this right now if you would like, as mine is deciding to catch up here. I know time is tight. I know we've got about 17 minutes left, but let's take a look at Virginia's literacy focus skills. And so your state standards are outlined here, and we found the ones that are most critical and most impactful, such that a STAR assessment is going to help you figure out in 3rd grade, what are those focus skills that are most impactful, that are most critical to learning for students, right? All standards are not created the same. Some of them, we might call them anchor standards. We might call them the ones that are going to move the needle most for kids. Let's unpack these and determine, based on our STAR performance, right? You administer a STAR assessment. The instructional reports that you get for your teachers are going to tell them the focus skills that are most important for them to teach in their next lesson, right? Across reading literary text and developing skilled readers and craft and style and integration of concepts. I know I'm going quick. Thanks for hanging on for the ride, but this is just our quick glimpse at how Renaissance is offering educators loads of resources. Again, this is free of charge right there out there on the internet for you to search. If students are exhibiting issues, what might be the most impactful and critical areas for you to focus your instruction on, and use your STAR assessment as the best way to hone in on those skills. So we've talked about STAR across a learning progression and hitting on those focus skills that are most impactful. How do we know that the screening that we've done for kids is going to make a difference, that it's going to be, that we're making decisions based on that data? And so my fifth question to you all is, what are our cut points, right? Are we saying, is it the same from one student to another, from one school to another, which kids get intervention and which kids don't, right? You might have local decision-making rules that are different from school to school, from district to district, and that's okay. You know what's right for your community. But certainly that we are going to unpack screener data. We don't test and then leave it, out there to dry, but rather we are unpacking it, we are analyzing it, we are learning from it so that we can take a look at that more deeply. I would just like to give a mention to, I've talked about EduClimber a few times here. I'm going to mention it again. If you want an environment where you can compare STAR data or perhaps your survey data or DNA data, as I unpacked there a little earlier, whatever, even local assessments, you want to pull your VALs, your SOLs, and others side by side with which grades did kids earn last quarter. EduClimber is a resource to do that, where I can triangulate across multiple resources, really serving as my MTSS hub to organize data across non-Renaissance solutions as well. Shout out to EduClimber as the place to do that work, as well as to use thresholds to automatically indicate which kids are coming up with risk factors. We just screened all students. EduClimber thresholds can alert us which students might need additional attention. It can alert us these 5 kids might be eligible for tier 2 or tier 3 interventions. Automatically on a nightly basis, scanning through your data and generating reports for you to tell you which kids are exhibiting risk factors, or as you might call it, an early warning system. So now we're going to talk about systematic implementation, which brings us to our 6th question. How do we know whether kids are responding to interventions? I am going to fast forward here because we already took a look at Tanner and his performance using Progress Monitor data. And we took a look at that overall view of the district success of our programs. So this is just a quick reminder to us that we do so systematically, that we do so with the mindset of moving the needle for kids who are getting more than just core instruction. This is where I'd like to introduce FastBridge as one of the premier solutions out there that constructed a progress monitor graph that was able to develop in shorter amount of time than other tools out there, whether kids are hitting their goal or not, right? Our fast track model helps you go from screening to intervening to determining whether that intervention works. And so progress monitoring with FastBridge is one of the most valid, reliable ways out there to determine whether kids are hitting their growth targets, hitting their goals within the context of the interventions that we deliver. All right, we've got a bit more to cover, and I'm going to make sure I get us out of here on time. Problem-solving process. In the VTSS model, your Virginia Department of Ed suggests that we need a process that relies on high-quality tools, that we believe our data to be true, right? Duffy Jones adopted Orton Gillingham because in that district, they expect it to make a difference for kids. And so we want to have clarity, evidence, support, so that when someone asks us why we're doing these practices, we can absolutely respond with a resonant, yes, it's working for kids, and let me show you how. And we make important strategic decisions based on it, right? We just talked about multi-tiers of support for kids, and it's really high-stakes decision-making to have a kid in a pull-out program, to refer a kid for special ed, right? And so let's have data that is abundantly reliable, valid, gives us the information that we need, such as STAR and FastBridge and DNA, like we just took a look at. And so iterating on our process to improve it over time, I love this term. This is unique to the VTSS model. I haven't seen this in another state yet. This iterative improvement is suggesting that we analyze, unpack what worked and what didn't work. And it's that sort of continuous improvement cycle where we are iterating and reiterating and reiterating what's working well. And what's not working, we don't say, well, we've done it this way for 15 years, so that's why we do it. That should never be one of our answers to why we're engaging in the practices that we do here in our districts. For you on this call, you know the importance of providing evidence and iterating on a process that's producing the right outcomes for kids. Whoopsies. Which brings me to my 7th question. When we are actually administering these tests and we're using it and we had some decision-making rules that I saw earlier, what does it actually look like in terms of those cycles, right? If you're testing fall, winter, spring, you ought to be analyzing fall, winter, spring, right? If you administer the SOLs and it's about time for the school year to end, sayonara, see you later, I might never use that test again. But educators, I'm sure some of you are using those summer work hours to unpack where we're going for next year, what worked well and didn't work well. Summative data is summarizing what learning looked like for the prior school year, right? And so that's the value of that in that spring window to say, this is our springboard into the following school year, in back to school, right? And so consider this our prompt to remind us that once testing is done, we're doing something with it, and we want to be clear about how that all looks. And so part of being clear about all of that is being aligned, being organized in the work that we do, right? And so as I'm taking a look at how your state model is reminding us the importance of the people that are involved in this, the leadership, and I'm going to jump into the teaming model to show you how I unpacked with Michigan what a champion looks like in their district and how that can level up the way that they use teams to bring their MTSS to life. We discussed thinking of that champion in your district. If you got someone sitting next to you, turn and talk with them. You're going to say, oh, that's Miss Jones for sure. You just know you've got them right off the top of your head, right? That's Mr. Smith, our 6th grade science teacher, who goes above and beyond with project-based learning out there in the forest with kids. As soon as the snow melts, he's going to be doing another activity out there. You've got those champions in your district. And so think about them. They are open to new ideas. They are making a difference for kids. They can influence positive change. They can even inspire other teachers to do the same, right? And so my question to you is, do they work in isolation, right? Do they close their door, huddle down, hunker down, do their work independently? Typically, they don't. Typically, they are going to be a part of a team, right? And so my 8th question to us is, what teaming models are in place for our MTSS to thrive, right? Where can this champion spread the love, cross-pollinate with other educators, and really, they say, if you use your torch to light someone else's torch, that does not make your own torch burn out, right? It only spreads the great practice that you are doing. And so this is when I talk about asset inventories, this is another asset inventory where we're just auditing the practices or the teams that we have in our district to see if it's working, right? To make a difference, again, for students. It might sound like a broken record, but that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. It's making a difference for kids, right? And so if we were in a seminar, if we were in person, this would be a turn and talk, but I might ask you, let's say again, if you're asynchronous, pause here and jot down a couple of teams in your district. Are they working? What are they doing? And do they rely on real data sources in order to bring that work to life, right? I don't have time necessarily for us to dig into each of these, but I offered a few ideas of what those teams might be. And again, in my work with 32 different principals at 32 different elementaries, when I was an MTSS coordinator, we asked them to fill these in. And by and large, every school found a gap. By and large, every school found where they're really winning and doing great work and capitalized on that. And I could share those stories from one school to another as well. So when we talk about a model of sharing in this collective work, supporting each other, this is our meetings module in EduClimate, which is a great environment in order to organize this important work, where I can record which educators are showing up to the meeting. I can clearly outline my MTSS protocol or agenda of how we do business. And then I'm going to fast forward a little bit, how we can dive into each kid that's on the docket. Look at how easily it displays their progress monitor graph from kid to kid. Are we changing, continuing, or ending those plans for students? What you can see at the bottom is a point sheet where I can show a kid's check-in, check-out progress, right? By period of the day, by which expectation, be on task, focus on teacher directions. We talked about my friend Cynthia with keeping hands to self in the cafeteria, right? Those individualized goals. Yeah, hey, Cynthia. So this is just our reminder that it's important to have an environment to collaborate. And EduClimber serves that purpose with the meetings module as a great way of accomplishing that. We have ongoing discussion out there, especially in this day and age, about what it means to focus on specific groups in your school community. We've all seen the model of equality versus equity, sort of a buzzword right now, that's for sure, on the national platform. What about family and community relations, where I'm taking a look here at this district model where they have A, B, C, D, E, F, G of their school improvement framework, and their call out to cultural responsiveness. What letter of the alphabet was it? Letter X, right? Basically the very end. What if we were to lead with which focus groups are most important and critical in our work, right? It's not one size fits all for all kids. There's targeted universalism, which suggests that what works for struggling students might very well work for all kids, right? Building a ramp for children who are unable to use the stairs is not only good for a kid in a wheelchair, it's good for the student who twists their ankle 3 weeks from now and says, you know what, I'm benefiting from that ramp too, right? And so let's consider how the structures we build in schools can follow that very same model of targeted universalism. Or simply put, what about the language considerations? Certainly we have families with a diverse set of languages that they bring to the table, that they bring to the school. In my district at Hamilton Middle School, we had 72 different languages represented in that school, right? And so let's remind ourselves about tools that are going to help us translate to that family's native language. We're using EduClimber smart forms that can auto-translate when you create a behavior intervention plan, a reading support plan, a gifted and talented support plan. If your recording family's native language is Spanish in your SIS, your student information system, EduClimber can automatically translate that behavior intervention plan right there into Spanish, that gifted and talented plan into Spanish. With 75 different languages represented, we are so excited that any plan you construct in EduClimber is available to parents auto-translated. And so this is just our dialogue about the considerations of which groups are a focus area, which prompts our 9th question. Are there specific groups or programs represented in your MTSS structures, and does your data reflect that focus, right? If we use a model to say, you know what, English learners are overrepresented in our suspension data, or students with disabilities are overrepresented in terms of our chronic absenteeism data, we're not going to shy away from those conversations. We're shining a light on it so we can do right by those kids, so that we can have targeted goals in our districts that are specific subgroup focused, right? And so many of the tools we've discussed on the Renaissance side are going to offer you ways of disaggregating your data based on those student groups. In other words, if we treasure it, we measure it. If we are focused on specific subgroups of kids, or as we're getting into now, if we treasure the attitudes that kids have about their learning, if we treasure whether students have a sense of self-efficacy or motivation in our classroom, or are socially engaged, are academically ready, let's measure those with a whole child model using SABRES and fundamentals to fill in those gaps. And so I'm going to take us home on this model here, where SABRES is our CASEL-aligned assessment tool. We have a screener and progress monitor called DBRs. This is where kids can self-endorse whether they feel that that sense of independence, whether they're able to engage and give attention to the instructor, and teachers rate students on them as well. So you can compare student and teacher ratings in terms of these CASEL domains of social behavior, academic behavior, and emotional behavior. If that's a little too intensive, we don't necessarily care to dig into that depth of a social emotional learning model. Rely on fundamentals instead as a way that we are going to unpack attitudes about learning. This is an attitudinal assessment where we're going to unpack that sense of motivation, self-efficacy. It has been adjusted in terms of a post-COVID standardization so that this is reliable to today's students in your schools. And so I'm leaving us with our 10th question. Do we effectively incorporate these non-academic factors, social, behavioral, or just attitudes about learning into our MTSS, into our totally full plate that our educators have? Much of this great work is already occurring in our schools. Let's rely on Renaissance Solutions to help us better organize them. Thanks, everybody. It's been a delight connecting with you all, and I'll let my colleagues take us home.
Well, Nick, I just want to thank you that your energy and enthusiasm and your expertise in this area is really appreciated. Wow. And you not only you aligned it to the Virginia support system, so we really appreciate that. And Aaron and Stephanie, we appreciate your partnership and just want to thank you for providing that information to us and spending time with us this morning.